my loves, and welcome to another episode of the Ages of Chaos. A much anticipated episode, this one. Certainly for me, I've been wanting to do this one for a long time. Since the book first hit my doorstep, in fact. I've just been rather busy lately, lots and lots going on, and I just haven't had the time, sadly. Also, look forward to another couple of episodes featuring books from the Age of Sigmar setting, from the Mortal Realms. The Hedonites of Slaanesh are out, as are the Blades of Khorne, so both of those will be getting an overview very, very soon. Very excited about the Hedonites. I don't know whether you know, but Slaanesh kind of like level pegs with Tzeentch for me. Slaanesh is easily one of my... Slaanesh may in fact be my favourite Chaos power. Everything Slaanesh represents, that sort of Dionysian thing, I love. I'm a sensualist. I'm a creative entity by my very nature. A little bit of a hedonist at times, by my own admission. Absolutely. I like my pleasures, so I do. Slaanesh just does it for me as a deity. If there were a deity in the 40k or Mortal Realms settings that I would worship, it would probably be Slaanesh. So the Hedonites, I mean, I just love that army. I love it to bits. And for there to be a new book out there, very exciting indeed. But we'll get to that when we get to it. This is, as you may have anticipated, Codex World Eaters. I mean, how long, guys, have you been waiting for this? I'm not a World Eaters player myself. Khorne being kind of my least favourite of the Chaos powers, if I'm honest. I mean, I love them all. But Khorne is the one that represents me the least. It's the one that I connect to the least. Obviously, Khorne is the god of anger and of hatred and of violence and of warfare in all of their many and varied forms. He is the most wholly destructive and negative of the Chaos powers insofar as I can see. I can see how there could be civilizations, for example, dedicated to any one of the other powers. Khorne, a bit more difficult. Certainly a bit more difficult. Not impossible, by the way, because there are civilizations dedicated to Khorne. There are, certainly in the Age of Sigmar setting, and even in the 40k setting, there are civilizations dedicated to Khorne. You know, tribes, human civilizations, long-lost militaries that have become sort of like war cults or violence cults. Tribes of humanity dedicated to gods of the hunt. Those are all dedicated to Khorne in their own peculiar ways. Assassin cults are all dedicated to Khorne. And then, of course, you have these guys. You have the World Eaters, who are, in many respects, the high priests of Khorne. They are dedicated to Khorne in his purest aspect, as the lord of self-effacing violence. They are dedicated to Khorne in a way that no other servant of Khorne is or ever could be. And how long, guys, have we been waiting? There has never been a dedicated World Eaters Codex. The closest we ever got was back in 7th Ed, when we had the much-missed Demonkin of Khorne, for which in many, many ways that was a prototype for this book in many, many, many respects. Now, first of all, to get, some of the housekeeping out of the way, the reception of this book, as is the case with all of the cult books, it was the same for the Thousand Sons, it was the same for the Death Guard, has been as enthusiastic as it has been sort of negative. The negative aspects is, of course, that the army list, like the army list for the Thousand Sons and the Death Guard, is much pared down. A lot of the stuff you could take when the Khorne, the World Eaters army list was made from the core Chaos Space Marines Codex, you can't anymore. And that, of course, means that a lot of people's miniatures ranges, they're not negated, because you can still make a Khorne Chaos Space Marine army and have it function fine. It just means that they are no longer like World Eaters in the same way that this Codex represents the World Eaters, So, and that's I get it. If you've put together like a really big, dedicated World Eaters army and it has stuff that you can't take anymore, I kind of get that. It's a bit of a shame. And there are certain omissions that are a little bit weird. For example, no Khorne Chaos Lord. No Chaos Lord in Terminator armor, which is a little strange because, especially given that there's that limited edition miniature based on the that piece of old Adrian Smith artwork, you know? That's kind of a shame, but on the other hand, I get what they're doing with this book. It's exactly what they've done with the other cult legions. They want them to be different. They don't want the World Eaters to be the same as a core Chaos Space Marine army. They want it to be far removed. They want it to be far more defined than that. And they are. I think, for my money, speaking as a non-World Eaters player, and also as a non-competitive player, I play the game more for role-playing than anything else, to be perfectly honest. I love this book. I love it as much as I love all of the other cult books. Maybe not as much as the Thousand Sons, because they're my thing, but I think this is a beautiful piece of work. The background is amazing. As with all the other cult legions, the World Eaters have been enormously expanded and elaborated on and made far more complex than they ever were before. A lot of material has been carried over. One thing I love that this book and the other cult books represent is that there's now a lot of interplay and cross-pollination between the rule books and the Black Library publications. A lot of stuff that only existed in the Black Library books is now canon in these books. For example, Nuceria, the World Eater's homeworld, is now officially labelled as Nuceria, as was coined by Aaron Dembski-Bowden in the book Betrayer, which really profoundly changed the World Eater's background and lent, certainly, Angron an entire other dimension. That's all in here, and that is brilliant. All the stuff about them originally being the Warhounds before they found Angron, the Warhounds Legion, that's here too. The stuff about the Conqueror being their flagship and Latara Sarin being the captain, the presiding captain of that ship, that's here. The stuff about Angron attaining demonhood amongst the sands of Nuceria as a result of Lorgar calling down a cornate warp storm around him, that's all in here. The stuff about Scalathrax is all in here. I mean, I love that. I love that to utter bits. Angron has so much pathos in this book. It's unbelievable. Whereas before he was definitely the most simplistic of the Demon Primarchs, psychologically now he's become one of the most complex. The book, when it talks about Angron, goes really deep into the utter tragedy of what drives him. The tragedy of Angron is that he's the most ruined of the Primarchs, and this book goes for it. And as a result, his legion, this is a legion of failures. This is a failed legion, and that's part of what drives them. This book goes to town talking about how the World Eaters were the only legion whose Primarch did not conquer their homeworld, and he didn't, right? He was almost going to be destroyed when the Emperor plucked him up, teleported him away. He was going to be murdered, right? And when he was met by his legion, he doesn't love them. He didn't have any love for them. He slaughtered those who came to meet him, like the World Eaters chapter master, who was the leader of the Warhounds at that point. He killed them, and he killed everyone who was sent to parley with him, apart from Khan the Betrayer. Khan, who was then the equerry of the World Eaters Legion, and became the equerry of Angron himself, because he's the only one who could bloody talk to him. All of that is in here. Angron is the most ruined, and in many respects he is the most failed of the Primarchs, because he did not conquer his homeworld. He did not create a civilization like the others did. Even Mortarion did that, you know? And part of that is what drives him, part of that self-loathing. It's part of the fury that sustains him, because of course now he's a demon, right? So he's a creature of the abstract. He is sustained by emotion. So that fury and that self-loathing, knowing that he is an utter failure, and also B, he is the epitome now in his demonic form of everything he once despised. He has always been a slave from beginning to end. He's striven against it. He's tried to break those chains, and now he's a slave that not even death can release. He is a slave until reality collapses in on itself, and maybe even beyond that, if chaos survives as it has survived like the collapses of myriad other realities, if Khorne survives, then Angron survives as an immortal slave of the blood god, and that anger is also what drives him. It's also what makes him, interestingly, one of the most physically powerful of the demon primarchs, because he is fueled and sustained by his own rage as well as that which surrounds him, and as a result he can't, and as a result of things like the Cicatrix Maledictum opening up, he can't be banished. He can just reform. His rage just means that he will never be sated. His bloodlust, his contempt for everything that exists out there, including himself and his own sons, means that he will never stop. He never connected with his legion in the same way the other Primarchs did. You know how Mortarion and Magnus both adored their sons and adored their legion above and beyond anything else? Angron never did. He saw them as slaves to what he called High Riders, which were the equivalent of the nobility that enslaved and mutilated him on Nuceria. He regarded the Emperor and the upper echelons of the Imperium as no different. He saw their hypocrisy, and that also is what fuels his rage. Part of Angron's rage in this book is the rage of the oppressed. It's not entirely unjustified, right? And I love that. It makes him so wonderfully pure. I love that so much. He's also the only demon Primarch that doesn't entirely revel in his condition. Fulgrim loves what he is. He loves being a servant of Slaanesh. He loves being the demon prince of pleasure. Mortarion is a bit more complex. Magnus is a bit more complex. But Angron just hates everything. He hates everything that he is. He is hate and anger and self-loathing embodied, and I frigging love that. Kharn the Betrayer, who has always been a very sort of straightforward character. He's always just been an avatar of Khorne, to the point whereby a lot of his personality has been lost, really, has been rewritten in this book and has been made a little bit more complex. What I love in this book is it makes a point of, when Kharn is not in battle, when the butcher's nails are not ticking away in his head, he's actually a calm, softly spoken, tactical genius. Even now, even saturated with the energy of Khorne as he currently is. That is wonderful. And he has some of the same complexities as his Primarch. Like, for example, it's suggested in this book that during the shattering of the Legion at Scalathrax, when the World Eaters fought against the Emperor's children, and Kharn turned on his own Legion and shattered it into various different vying warbands, there is a suggestion here that he did that on purpose. He did it with the last vestiges of his sanity, because he saw what the Legion was becoming, and realised that if it was still united, it would be one of the most hideous, destructive forces in all creation. So he deliberately shattered it for that reason. And that is so cool, right? That is so cool. It just makes Kharn a far more interesting character. It makes him a bit more complex. You've got the new character, the Lord Invocatus, who is mysterious, very mysterious. You don't really know where he comes from, whether he's an old captain of the Legion or whether he is a more recently turned renegade. But he, like Kharn, represents a slightly different and more subtle aspect of the World Eaters. That subtlety, that seems, bizarrely, for the World Eaters, that seems to be the key with the special characters here. What they've done with them is use them to represent different extremes of Khorne's worship. So it is not just the case that the World Eaters are completely mindless butchers who just hurl themselves willy-nilly at the enemy. They're still Space Marines. That's a point in this book. They're still Space Marines, and they still, to a degree, represent all of the training and the psycho-conditioning and the natural capabilities that Space Marines have for tactics. And that's what the Lord Invocatus represents. The Lord Invocatus is a tactical genius who is all about calling the enemy's bluff, perceiving the traps and the movements that they're laying, and then calling them out by charging headlong into them with his World Eaters, springing the trap, and then demoralizing the enemy by making them realize that it hasn't worked and it's never going to work. It makes him really fascinating. He is a strange species of World Eater that is very considered and realizes that his warband can spill far more blood and reap far more skulls for Khorne with a little bit of tactics and planning. I love that. I love that to absolute bits. He also rides a flaming, flying juggernaut of Khorne, which is pretty damn cool. I'm sure you'll agree. There's a load of stuff in here about the various different warbands and subsects of the World Eaters, unlike, say, the Thousand Sons or the Death Guard, both of whom, despite being spread across the galaxy in different cults and Vectoria and covens and warbands, they have a centralized authority. The Death Guard still answer to Mortarion by and large. Even Typhus, who doesn't like Mortarion very much, even they still answer Mortarion's call. And they have a central base of operations, which is the Plague Planet, of course. The Thousand Sons, even those that don't necessarily respect Magnus anymore, even the likes of Ahriman, who is an exile from the Sorciarius, the planet of the sorcerers, they still answer Magnus's call when he makes it. There is still centralized authority there. The World Eaters, there's none of that. There's none of that. They don't have a home world. Angron doesn't have a demon world. They are, as the description says, a legion broken and divided into various different warbands, all of whom have their own belief systems, their own philosophies, their own panoply, and their own beliefs about Angron and about what Khorne is and what Khorne wants and their purpose in the universe. It's really, really interesting. There are some fantastic little details and little subtleties and different variations on Khorne worship going on here that makes it more interesting and more complex than just kill, main, burn, kill, main, burn, kill, main, burn. It's fascinating. I love it to bits. I absolutely love it to bits. Tiny little moan from me here. The butcher surgeons that implant the butcher's nails are talked about a lot in this book, but they're not a unit. And they're not a unit because there was not a model ready for this book, and that's a bit of a shame. Since we've got 10th ed coming around, I've got a funny feeling when the World Eaters book hits, then we're going to get the Butcher Surgeons, because they're talked about too much for them not to be. Sort of like the World Eaters equivalents of both Tech Marines and Apothecaries melded into one. Kind of interesting, you know? There's stuff about the 8-bound, the new Khorne 8. I suppose they are possessed units in many respects. You don't have the possessed from the Core Chaos Space Marine book. You have bespoke Khorne 8 possessed units too. 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. An 8-bound are created by the Butcher Surgeons in this really sadistic ritual where they bind the supplicant in this thing called the 8 cage, which is like a big coffin, and the 8 cage connects to the butcher's nails and it hurtles the soul and consciousness of the World Eater into Khorne's own realm, beyond the warp, and the World Eater has to physically and psychologically battle with the 8 demons who are going to possess them and draw them into their own body. So they're possessed by 8 demons, these guys, and they are in a constant state of conflict even when they're released from the 8 cage. The ones who manage to overcome the demons and fuse with them into a single consciousness are the Exalted 8-bound, and they both do subtly different things on the battlefield. That's lovely. One of my favourite sections of the background is called Purity of Slaughter, and it goes really, really deep into how, for some of the World Eaters and some of the servants of Khorne, they reach this apex once it's almost like they become what they call sages of slaughter. They reach this state of nirvana through the constant rage and the bite of the nails. It erodes all other concerns and results in a certain purity and focus of perspective, and they are no longer conflicted like the other
servants of Khorne. They're no longer driven by the pain. They operate in this state of absolute purity where they perceive everything around them and they function mentally and psychologically fine. They've used rage as their pathway to a kind of revelation, to a kind of nirvana state, and it's absolutely brilliant. I love that. I love that to absolute bits. Again, a new piece of background. It's a new piece of background that lends the World Eaters a little bit more complexity. It makes them a little bit more interesting. I love it to bits. Lots of lovely colour page. Oh, by the way, the artwork in this book is amazing. I would say better than most of the codexes that have been released, because it's various. It still has some of that house style that Games Workshop have built up, but there are these big stylised pages of splashy, almost comic book red that have little bits of narrative in them. I just love that to bits. Love it to absolute bits. Lots of lovely colour pages in the heavy metal section with the new jackals, the Khornate cultists, the new Khorne berserkers. Adam, yes, there are new Khorne berserkers. I'm sorry, mate. Those lovely old ones from the late 1990s, they're gone. They're gone. And the new ones are in. The 8-bound, which people, mixed reception for the 8-bound. I like them myself. I really, really like them. And, of course, Angron himself, who is a frigging beast of a miniature. What a beautiful thing. The Lord Invocatus and the new Lord on Juggernaut, which we haven't had since the days of, like, the lead miniatures back in 2nd Ed. Absolutely wonderful. Now, as the rules go, big changes here. Big changes. You can tell that this is one of the last army books in 9th Ed, because I think this book reflects, in terms of format, more what we're going to get going into 10th Ed, what the format is going to be. This book is designed for ease of use. A lot of one of the best things about this book, they've looked through it and all redundancy is pared away. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the ability to customise my army. The problem is with a lot of the books, even in 9th Ed, which I would argue has the best and the strongest run, the most consistent run of codices in terms of their rules ever, in any edition of Warhammer 40,000. There's still this problem with internal balance where there are options, which are fun, but they're kind of redundant because they are superseded by better options. Take my favourite codex, for example, the Thousand Sons. Love the Thousand Sons to bits. Love the fact you can take all the Covens, all the Cabals and whatnot. The thing is, in realistic terms, people are only going to take 2 of those covens. Let's be fair. They're only going to take the cults rather. They're going to either they're going to take the cult of duplicity. No, 3. To be fair, they're going to take the cult of duplicity, the cult of magic, or the cult of time, because they're the best ones. The others are fun and interesting and useful in niche situations, but otherwise, those 3 have the best balance, so there are redundant options. There's kind of like the illusion of choice in that regard. What this book does is it does away with that entirely, and I love that to bits. Things have been much simplified. You have 1 page of stratagems, 2 technically for the 2 different divergent army lists. You've got 3 relics for each of the army lists and your legion trait, and that's kind of it. And you've got your warlord traits as well, 3 warlord traits, and then you've got the blood tithe table, which is the army-wide rule, and it's brilliant. For me, this is frigging amazing because it makes everything so much simpler, and you know what? There's not a redundant choice in the book. There are reasons for taking everything in the book, and that, Games Workshop, please, more of that. No more redundant units, no more redundant options. Give us stuff that works and we would consider taking, So, the blood tithe thing. The blood tithe is this army's army-wide special rule, and the way it works is, whenever, basically, if every unit from your army has the World Eater's keyword, you gain blood tithe points over the course of the battle. As described below, keep a note of your blood tithe points total. Each time a unit is destroyed, you gain 1 blood tithe point. So that's either your units or the enemy units. At the end of each phase in any battle round, if any character, monster, or vehicle units were destroyed in that phase, you gain 1 additional blood tithe point. So, if a character is killed in either army in any phase, whether it's the enemy's or yours, then you would gain 1 blood tithe point for a unit being destroyed and 1 for a character, right? Or if it's a monster, 1 for that. At the end of each phase, if any Titanic units were destroyed that phase, you gain 1 additional blood tithe point. So you can see how, because this operates in both phases, in both battle rounds rather, and in each phase, it's very easy to rack these up. So at the end of each phase, after gaining any blood tithe points, you can spend them to purchase a blessing of the blood god. You can purchase as many of these blessings of the blood god as you wish during the battle, but you can only purchase 1 per phase, with the exception of Reborn in Blood. You can only purchase each blessing of the blood god once per battle. Each blessing of the blood god has an associated blood tithe point cost. If you do not have enough blood tithe points for the blessing, you cannot purchase it. Fine. So, the thing is, these blood tithe abilities last the entire battle. They apply to every unit in your army, barring 1 exception. And they stack. So your units get better as both your own units and the enemy units die. And that, I've just got to take a moment to comment upon that because it's brilliant. The subtlety of it is fantastic. There is something psychological about this which is absolutely brilliant. It changes the psychology of the way you look at your own units and the way you look at your units being destroyed. For almost every other army, units being destroyed is a bad thing, right? In this book, some units is practically encouraged. So your cultists, for example, they're almost sacrificial. Your jackals, they are almost sacrificial. They are there to be destroyed because as they're being destroyed, your army is getting better and better and better and more elite and more elite and more elite. It changes the psychology of the way World Eaters players look at their units and look at their army. It's also a brilliant way of getting over one of the core problems that World Eaters armies have always faced in every edition of Warhammer 40,000, which is they're not a shooty army. Getting across the battlefield without being shot to bits, that kind of doesn't matter as much anymore, because not only are there rules for sort of getting around that, there's this. So, okay, your units are being shot to bits, fine. The other units are getting more powerful and more powerful and more powerful and more powerful to the point whereby they're getting pretty damn nasty. So what have you got? Spiteful Nullification. This is 2 blood tithe points. The blood god burns protective runes into the flesh of his chosen warriors. Until the end of the battle, each time a World Eaters model from your army would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound, roll 1d6. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. So it's a shrug against psychic powers, effectively, and also other abilities that cause mortal wounds. It's bloody good. Warp Blades, 4 blood tithe points. Khorne imbues the blades of his chosen warriors with the essence of the warp, rendering them capable of passing straight through the armour of their foes. Until the end of the battle, each time a World Eaters model from your army makes a melee attack, improve the armour penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. Given that almost every unit in this army already has at least a -1 on its armor penetration, that's very good. And considering that things like Khorne Berserkers already have a -2, that means that they can operate at -3, which is really fantastic. Rage-fueled Invigoration, 3 blood tithe points. As the battlefield becomes a charnel house, those who spill blood in Khorne's name find their muscles swelling with unnatural power, helping them propel towards the foe in bestial bounds. Until the end of the battle, add 1 to charge rolls made for World Eaters units from your army. Again, fantastic little benefit that helps your units get into the combat to make those charges they need. Martial Excellence, 5 blood tithe points. Khorne infuses his warriors with great speed and fury. Every blade sweep they swiftly follow with another, cutting their foes down with a flurry of killing blows. Until the end of the battle, each time a World Eaters model from your army makes a melee attack, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. potentially amazing given how many attacks you're going to be chucking out with most of your units. That's nasty. That's the one I'd be going for first, if I'm perfectly honest. Savage Guidance, 5 Blood Tithe points. As Khorne's blessed warriors raise their blades, time seems to slow for them, but their perceptions remain sharp, guiding their strikes to the necks of even the most evasive foes. Until the end of the battle, each time a melee attack is made by a World Eater's model from your army, add 1 to that attack's hit roll. Just ensures you are getting more of those attacks off. Very good. Bearing in mind, by the way, these are all stacking as you go along, yeah? The eliteness of these units is unbelievable by really the midpoint of the battle. A Wrathful Devotion, 4 Blood Tithe points. Khorne pours his rage into his chosen warriors, compelling them to fight through even the most grievous injuries. Until the end of the battle, each time a World Eater's model from your army would lose a wound, roll a die 6. On a 6, that wound is not lost. So it's a shrug. It's an army-wide shrug of 6, which actually is really useful. It's going to be helping your World Eater survive armies with the big guns, like your Tau and your Eldari and your Drukhari and your Votan and whatnot, and your Astra Militaria. Total carnage, 6 Blood Tithe points. The Blood Gods chosen feel the might of their patron, filling them with the desire only to slaughter in his name. Until the end of the battle, each time a melee attack is made by a World Eater's model from your army, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target. So potentially your squads of Khorne Berserkers are going to be able to take down the likes of Titans and Knights just with the sheer amount of attacks they throw out. Can you see how this works and how psychologically it works? It's brilliant. It's absolutely wonderful. They have really thought about this. It's so considered. It's very, very good indeed. The last one is very special, Reborn in Blood, and it only applies to Angron, this. Should Angron's immortal form suffer even catastrophic damage, you can reform it through sheer force of will. Place a destroyed Angron model from your army into Blasphemous Reserves, with 8 wounds remaining. That model is no longer considered to be destroyed, and can be set up again in your reinforcement step as if it had the Warp Strike ability. So, as long as you keep getting those Blood Tithe points, Angron's just going to keep coming back. He's a bastard. Angron is insane in this book. Next page, you've got the Legion trait, which is Relentless Rage. The World Eaters fight in a perpetual fury, driven ever onwards to slaughter all who stand in their way. All of their warriors have been subject to horrific psychosurgery, implanted with crude devices that amplify their aggression, while some also submit to possession by the raging demons of the Blood God. Whatever drives their berserk rage, these warriors only stop killing when every foe lies in ruin at their feet, and sometimes not even then. At the start of the fight phase, if this unit made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, until the end of the phase, add 1 to the strength and attacks characteristic of models in that unit. It's really good. It is useful for every unit in the army. It will function in almost every close combat scenario. It's really, really good. Given the amount of attacks these guys have base, given the amount they're going to be throwing out with things like stratagems and warlord traits and the Blood Tithe table, it's really good. Now for the core World Eaters army, the 3 relics you get, yes, only 3, and none of them are redundant, thank you Games Workshop. Helm of Brazen Ire. This helm is forged from unbreakable brass from the Blood God's own throne. Any who seek to take the bearer's skull find their blade broken upon it. Each time an attack is made against the bearer, subtract 1 from that attack's wound roll. Just make sure characters that bit more survivable. Berserker Glaive. This is an old favourite from Codex Chaos Space Marines 3.5, I believe. The bearer of this demon-infested weapon is driven to a state of apoplectic frenzy by the proximity of its red-hot steel. Apoplectic, that's a lovely word. This relic replaces an exalted chain blade or axe of dismemberment and has the following profile. So it's a really big, nasty weapon, effectively. And its abilities, each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified hit of 6 scores 2 additional hits. In addition, with anything you're getting from Relentless Rage, from stratagems, and from the Blood Tithe table, It's nasty. In fact, it's really bloody nasty. Talisman of Rage. This brass icon constantly oozes burning blood, driving those World Eaters nearby into an even more ferocious killing rage. In your command phase, you can select one World Eater's core unit within 9 inches of the bearer. Until the start of your next command phase, each time a melee attack is made by models in that unit, an unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds the target. So you can use it to buff units that are nearby who are in crucial combats. It's really good. It's really, really damn good. I can see the Talisman of Rage featuring quite a lot, actually. Warlord traits. Favoured of Khorne. This warlord has the favour of Khorne. The blood god seems to aid him in his slaughter with a portion of his own power. In your command phase, if this warlord is on the battlefield, you gain 1 blood tithe point. Cheap and cheerful, very, very useful. True Berserker. When this warlord meets his foes face to face, his fury is such that he can brush aside even fatal wounds. The better to claim more skulls for Khorne, which we always like. Each time a melee attack is allocated to this warlord, half the damage characteristic. That's good. That's good. That will make your Demon Prince or your Khorne Lord on Juggernaut very survivable. Battle Lust. This warlord's lust for battle draws him into any and all fights, each brutal melee driving him to new heights of battlefield frenzy. This warlord is eligible to perform a heroic intervention if it is within 6 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertically of any enemy units. Each time this warlord makes a heroic intervention move, it can move up to 6 inches. So, at the start of this fight phase, if this warlord is within engagement range of enemy units, it can fight first. So again, it helps the warlord get into combat and it helps them get their attacks off first. It's pretty good. It's pretty damn good. Stratagems, only 1 page of stratagems, and they are all good. They're all damn good. That's amazing. Red Butchers, The elite of the World Eaters are a particularly vicious breed. Killers beyond compare, they have committed atrocities beyond number in the name of Khorne. Use this stratagem in the fight phase when a World Eater's Terminators or 8-bound unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to the damage characteristic of that attack. Given that, I know people are a bit upset that the Red Butchers are not their own bespoke Terminator unit, and I get that. That would have been nice, but you know what? Given that the Chaos Space Marine Terminators with the Mark of Khorne and the Legion trait in this book are nasty as all hell, and that makes them even nastier, it's fine. World Eaters Terminators are some of the nastiest Terminators in the game with that stratagem. It's really, really good. Gory Dismemberment. The World Eaters are not noble fighters. No, they are damn well not. They hack their foes down with smashing blows, tear them apart with screaming chain axes, or fell them with tainted blades in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Use this stratagem in the fight phase when a World Eater's core or World Eater's character unit from your army is selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target in addition to any normal damage. A maximum of 6 mortal wounds can be inflicted each time this stratagem is used. That is very nasty. Bloody hell, that. And considering it only costs 1 command point as well, that's an absolute bargain. It just makes your units that much nastier in melee. I've got a cup of coffee, by the way, which I need. Sadly, it's not a cup of boiling blood. Skulls for the Skull Throne. This is an epic deed stratagem. Khorne rewards those who test their might against the strongest foes, blessing the greatest warriors with his favour. Use this stratagem when an enemy warlord is destroyed by a melee attack made by a World Eater's character model from your army. Select 1 or both of the following. You gain 2 additional blood tithe points, very good. Until the end of the battle, add 1 to advance rolls and charge rolls made for the World Eater's character model. Either way, they're very, very good, you know? It's a very nice stratagem. Scorn of Sorcery, bit of magic defense. Like the god they worship, the warriors of the World Eaters despise psykers and their trickery, and through the sheer force of their hatred can sever sorcerers' powers. Use this stratagem in your opponent's psychic phase after a psychic test is passed for an enemy psyker unit, and after any deny the witch attempt is made, if any. If that enemy psyker unit is within 24 inches of any World Eaters unit from your army, roll 1d6. On a 4+, that psychic power is denied. So it just gives them a bit of psychic defense, which they kind of need because they don't really have any otherwise.
Next up, we have Blood Frenzy, obviously very characterful for the World Eaters. Even mortal wounds are insufficient to prevent World Eaters from giving Khorne his due, spilling blood until their very last breaths. It's kind of cool, that is. I mean, that's a bit of the background for the World Eaters. One of the things they do is they'll even turn their chain weapons on themselves if they can't get to the enemy. It's a lovely bit of grim, dark OTT sort of nonsense, which I really, really love. Use this stratagem in the fight phase. When an enemy unit is selected to fight, select one World Eater's core unit from your army that is within engagement range of that enemy unit until that enemy unit's attacks have been resolved. Each time a model in the selected unit is destroyed by a melee attack, if that model has not fought this phase, do not remove it from play. The destroyed model can fight after that enemy unit's attacks have been resolved and is then removed from play. If the selected World Eater's unit is a troops unit, this stratagem costs 1 command point, otherwise it costs 2. Yeah, it's a nice little bonus which, again, alters the psychology of your units being destroyed. It means that they can still fight in melee, they can still get their attacks in, and that's going to act as a very good deterrent when it's used on particularly nasty units like Terminators, for example, or the 8-bound. Aggressive intervention. The Sons of Angron are ever eager to meet their foe in glorious hand-to-hand combat. Such warriors do not wait for their foe to reach them, but instead surge forward desperate to spill blood. Use this stratagem in the heroic intervention step of your opponent's charge phase. Select one World Eater's core unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, that unit is eligible to perform a heroic intervention as if it were a character unit, and is eligible to perform heroic intervention if it is within 6 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertically of any enemy units. When performing a heroic intervention with that unit, you can move each model in that unit up to 6 inches. All the other rules for heroic interventions still apply. I mean, the key with this one is that it's during your opponent's charge phase. So it's a way of disrupting your enemy's battle plans, which is kind of key for the World Eaters, particularly in the melee or assault section of the game. But it's also a way of getting into combat and staying there, of making sure you kind of control the opponent's charge phase. Can be very useful. Smoke screen, that's just the same as it is for all the other Space Marines. Icon of Wrath, this is a nice throwback to the old days when the Icon of Wrath was something you could buy for a World Eater's unit, and it's been around since the days of Realms of Chaos, I do believe. There was even a model for it once upon a time, way back when. There used to be in Second Ed a metal World Eater that had an Icon of Wrath. I think I've still got one of him somewhere, actually. The brass icons raised above Khorne's host radiate killing energy. Those who fight beneath them race towards the foe, eager to consecrate their sigils with the blood of their enemy. Use this stratagem in the charge phase when a World Eater's icon unit from your army is selected to charge. Until the end of the phase, each time you make a charge roll for that unit, roll 1 additional dice 6 and discard the lowest result. It's just a way of making sure that your charges work. And that's kind of essential for the World Eaters. They're not very good at anything else, to be honest. So making sure that they successfully make those charges is absolutely essential. It's good. On the next page, you've got the only other divergent army. For this, there's none of the sub-factions like there are in other 9th Ed codices, because this is clearly, since it's towards the end of 9th and the beginning of 10th, which we've now had announced, of course, this is the prototype. This is what they're going to look like, and quite frankly, I really like it. I really, really like it. It's got all the character it needs, but it's much simplified. It's much easier to make your army selection. So these are the disciples of the Red Angel. Only those imbued with unnatural resilience are able to plunge themselves into the apocalyptic fighting that draws the attention of the Red Angel. So there are certain restrictions and benefits with this army. So your army must include an Angron model, and the model must be your warlord. So it's got to be led by Angron. Fine, that's not exactly a deficit, is it? Your army can only include Khorne Demon units and World Eater's Chaos Land Raider units. So that's interesting. Basically, this is the Demon Kin. It's kind of like the Demon Kin army. You can only take 8-bound, which are effectively demons themselves, or at least have the Khorne Demon keyword, Exalted 8-bound. And you can also include any of your characters that have the Demon keyword. So Demon Princes, your Chaos Lords on Juggernauts,
for example, they all have the demon keyword, so that works. But you can also have your allied detachment of Khorne demons, and interestingly, the way it's worded, the Blood Tithe does work with regards to the allied Khorne demons, so you can use them to sort of bolster the army. It's really interesting. It's a really odd, unusual, unbalanced army. Very elite, very unusual. It's going to be interesting. I haven't seen this play yet, but it's going to be very interesting seeing how it does. 8-bound units in your army have the objective secured ability, so that's very good too. It effectively makes your 8-bound almost your troops, effectively. And, 8-bound are very, very tough indeed. The Legion trait is exactly the same. 3 different relics. You've got the Burning Plate. This impervious armor drips constantly with molten brass. Add 1 to armor saving throws made for the bearer. Add 1 to the bearer's wounds characteristic. So on a Demon Prince, that's very good. On a Lord on Juggernaut, that's very good. It just makes them that bit beefier, Soul Burner. This weapon draws its unnatural ammunition directly from the boiling blood at the base of Khorne's great brazen throne. This relic replaces an infernal cannon and has the following profile. So, abilities: each time an attack is made with this weapon, that attack automatically hits the target. It basically turns a Demon Prince's infernal cannon into a flamer type weapon, which can be very useful. The Skull of Angrant. This brazen skull perceives the weakness of any foe and whispers them to the bearer. In your command phase, select 1 enemy unit that is visible to the bearer. Until the start of your next command phase, each time the bearer makes a melee attack against the selected enemy unit, you can re-roll the wound roll. Just a nice little benefit that makes your warlord a bit killier, effectively. All useful in their own peculiar ways. I think the Burning Plate is probably the one you're likely to go with. One of the interesting additions, you have, instead of having warlord traits, you have demonic infusions, and these are selected for your World Eater's 8-bound. Of course, you don't need warlord traits because you're taking Angron, and Angron's the only one with a warlord trait, and his is built in. So we've got Drawn to Power. These bound demons are drawn to sites of bloody significance. Each model in this unit counts as 2 models when determining control of an objective marker. Very bloody useful, especially for the 8-bound, because they're going to be difficult to shift. That makes them a bit more like objective takers, and that's very, very interesting. Mutable Form. The bodies of these warriors are constantly growing bladed horns, brazen claws, and other vicious adornments. Each time a model with this ability makes a melee attack on an unmodified wound roll of 6, inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target, in addition to any normal damage. Very, very nice. That makes 8-bound very killy indeed. Possibly one of the killiest assault units in the game. Brazen Skin. The armor fused to these 8-bounders mixed with brass from Khorne's own realm, taking on an otherworldly resilience. Each time a model in this unit would lose a wound roll as a result of a mortal wound, roll 1d6. On a 4+, that wound is not lost, so they get a shrug. That's very nice. That's very, very nice. Makes them very difficult to shift, in fact. A whole host of new stratagems for this army. Gratuitous Bloodletting. When the scent of the foe's blood is on the wind, the followers of Angron will ensure that every last drop is spilled in honour of the Lord of Battle. Use this stratagem in the fight phase. When a World Eater's unit from your army is selected to fight, select 1 enemy unit within engagement range of that unit that is below half strength. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that World Eater's unit makes an attack against the selected enemy unit, add 1 to that attack's wound roll. So it's a very good way of taking out units that have already been a little bit diminished. Blood Scent. Cowardice cannot be countenanced by the sons of Angron. Should the foes seek to flee, the World Eaters give chase to ensure the attempt is futile. Use this stratagem in your opponent's movement phase when an enemy unit within engagement range of any 8-bound units from your army falls back. After that enemy unit has finished that move, select 1 8-bound unit from your army that was within engagement range of that enemy unit at the start of the phase. The selected unit can immediately consolidate, and when it does so, each model in that unit can move up to 6 inches instead of up to 3. So it's a way of making sure the enemy can't retreat. And then, pull shenanigans with shooting attacks and whatnot. It keeps them within engagement range, which is going to be essential for this army. Furious Surge. The 8-bound exist in a state of almost permanent fury, and when their brethren are struck down from afar, they charge forward to exact retribution for the cowardly act. Use this stratagem in your opponent's shooting phase after an enemy unit has finished making its attacks. Select 1 8-bound unit from your army that had 1 or more models destroyed as a result of those attacks. The 8-bound unit can make a normal normal move as if it were your movement phase. So it effectively means that after being shot at, your 8-bound can then move like Khorne Berserkers do, and that's pretty good. Diabolic Machines. Even the tainted machineries of the World Eaters are affected by Angron's rageful presence, their bound spirits seeking to destroy their foe despite any damage done to their metallic form. Use this stratagem in your command phase. Select one World Eater's machine spirit or World Eater's demon engine model from your army that has characteristics that change as it suffers damage. And until the start of your next command phase, that model is considered to have its full wounds remaining for the purposes of determining what characteristics on its profile to use. So it just means that it means that your machines and your war engines will be operating at full capacity. It's situational, but it can be good. Apoplectic Frenzy, good name. Those who fight in the shadow of the Red Angel are driven to even greater depths of rage, surging towards the foe in a barely controlled tide. Use this stratagem in your movement phase when a World Eaters unit from your army is selected to advance. Do not make an advance roll. Instead, until the end of the phase, add 6 inches to the move characteristic of models in that unit. So it just means it's a way of getting around some of the problems in a World Eaters army. It means that they will move forward quickly towards the foe and get into engagement range that much quicker. Violent Dismemberment. The World Eaters do not kill with elegance, but as savage butchers, hacking apart their prey and letting their lifeblood pump onto the battlefield. Those who witness these massacres frequently attempt to flee to avoid being the next victims. Use this stratagem in the fight phase when a World Eaters unit from your army destroys an enemy unit. Until the end of the turn, that unit gains the following ability: Violent Dismemberment Aura. While an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit, subtract 2 from the leadership characteristic of models in that unit, and subtract 1 from combat attrition tests taken for that unit. Situational, but can be very useful. It means that certain enemy units are going to be more likely to fail their morale checks and therefore are more likely to lose models or to flee entirely. Terrifying Assault. The disciples of the Red Angel are terrifying to behold. Many foes who would normally fight boldly freeze in terror at the sight of such demonic horrors bearing down upon them. Use this stratagem in your charge phase when you select enemy units as the target of a charge made by a World Eaters unit from your army. Select one of those enemy units. That enemy unit cannot fight Overwatch or set to defend against that attack. In the subsequent fight phase, each time a model in that enemy unit makes a melee attack, subtract 1 from that attack's hit roll. So it means that your units are not going to get shot up for charging, which is really, really good. And it means that in the subsequent assault, the enemy units are not going to be able to fight back as effectively. Quite useful. Bloodthirsty Determination. Those who follow Angron on his bloody rampages let nothing stand in the way of getting to grips with the foe. Use this stratagem in your charge phase when you select a World Eaters unit from your army to charge. Until the end of the phase, you can ignore any or all modifiers to charge rolls made for that unit. So effectively, it is another one of those stratagems that it allows the World Eaters to get over some of their inherent problems and flaws. It's quite good. Okay, so we've got the data sheets here. The first one, obviously, is Angron. And as you'd expect, he's an absolute beast. He's still quite low on toughness for such a big demonic entity, like all the demon Primarchs. He's got 18 wounds, he's got 12 attacks base, but that's only base. Obviously, with his weapons, Samniarius and Spine Grinder, he has 2 different styles of attack, so he can do the Bloodletting Sweep, which is it's his reaping attack effectively, and each time an attack is made with that profile, then you make 3 hit rolls. So that's pretty insane. He potentially has 40 attacks on the charge, which is insane. Absolutely insane. There's very little that's going to be able to stand up against this guy. What else can he do? He's got your normal sort of like aura abilities, Lord of the Arena. He can give commands. Interestingly, he has a special Wrathful Presence. In your command phase, select one of the following abilities. This model has that ability until the start of your next command phase. Infectious Rage. While a friendly World Eater's core unit is within 6 inches of this model, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of models in that unit. Very good. Given that they all have very high attacks anyway, it's very good. glorious bloodletting. While another friendly World Eaters unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, reroll a hit roll of 1. Again, very good. Just make sure they're going to be hitting more accurately. And Righteous Slaughter. While a unit, so friendly or not, is within 6 inches of this model, that unit cannot fall back. So both armies, when Angron is in the thick of it, are going to stay stuck in combat. He's a meat grinder. That's what Angron is. And also, given that he can resurrect with the Blood Tithe, you don't want to be coy with him. I've seen a lot of fights, a lot of battles where players are not playing him to his strengths. They're playing him far too coy. You don't hold back with this guy. You get in there and get him destroying the most threatening enemy units. Chuck him at a Baneblade or something like that, or at the big Custodes unit or whatever. That's what you want to do with Angron. He also has a very good aura, which is the Red Angel. It's his Warlord trait. And effectively, it takes away objective secured for enemy units within 6 inches, which is really damn useful. You've got Khan, good old Khan the Betrayer, who's had a bit of a glow up. He now has basically 9 attacks base, but with the Warlord trait, that's 10. On top of any other benefits that he has. His Warlord trait, Arch Slaughterer, gives him more attacks. He's going to kill almost anything you chuck him at. Almost anything you chuck Khan at, he is going to absolutely destroy. He also has a very nice aura, Legendary Killer, which allows friendly World Eaters to re-roll wound rolls of 1, which is really unusual but very useful. You've got one of the new favourites, actually, the new special character, the Lord Invocatus, which people are calling the Lord Avocado, which I really rather like. He's an upgraded version of the Lord on Juggernaut. He's got basically the same profile, but he has a better close combat weapon, which is Coward's Bane, which effectively takes away invulnerable saving throws. He can fly because his Juggernaut rides on fire through the air. And he also has an amazing, and I mean absolutely amazing, Warlord trait, which is the Road of 8 Bloody Steps. He can effectively, at the start of the first battle round, he can select 2 World Eaters core units within 9 inches, and they can make a normal move. That's incredible. That's absolutely insane. If you haven't got Angron, you want him as your Warlord, because that ability to make a normal move at the beginning of the game is so good for World Eaters. It's so good. He's also got the Leading the Charge aura ability, which the normal Lord on Juggernaut has, which means that while a friendly World Eater's core unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time that unit is selected to make a normal move or advance, until the end of the phase, add 2 inches to the move characteristic of models in that unit. So it's one of these things that's overcoming some of the base flaws of the army. It means they're not going to be spending so much time in no man's land running across the battlefield getting shot. You've got the World Eater's Demon Prince, it's a Demon Prince, but it's got the glowed up profile from the Chaos Space Marine Codex. It's very nice. It's got the Blood Tithe ability. It can take an Infernal Cannon, which is lovely. It's a very decent HQ option, that is. You've got your World Eater's Lord on Juggernaut, who's very, very nice. He does everything the Lord Avocado does, except that he doesn't fly. He doesn't have the weapon that takes away invulnerable saves. He's got the Leading the Charge ability. He's a very nice sort of vanilla HQ unit. You've also got the World Eater's Master of Executions. Of course, this had to be in here, because these were a reference to Khorne in the base Chaos Space Marine Codex anyway. I'd say it's not as good as the other HQ units, but if you have a spare slot going, he isn't bad either. He's a very good sort of character assassin, this guy. You've got your Khorne Berserkers, who are not quite the same as they were in the Get You By army list. They've got 4 attacks base instead of 5, but with the Warlord trait, with the Legion trait, that's 5 effectively, with the ability to gain loads more attacks through stratagems and special rules and the Blood Tithe and whatnot. They have a new special rule, which is Blood Surge, which effectively means if they're shot at, they can make a normal move, which is really good. It makes the enemy more reluctant to shoot at them, and it also means that, again, they're moving across the battlefield. You've got the Jackals, which are your sacrificial cultist units, but they're also very nice. I mean, they've got 3 attacks base, so these guys are pretty good, especially if there's a lot of them. They're going to be doing a reasonable amount of damage on the charge. You've got your World Eaters Terminator squad, which is the same as the Terminators in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, except they have 4 attacks base. So they're pretty nasty in close combat, and they have the Blood Tithe ability as well. They're actually pretty unpleasant, these guys. They fill in a lot of gaps in the army. They've got really good armor busting, these guys. Pretty good firepower, so I imagine most armies are going to take a unit of Terminators because they fill too many gaps in the army. You've got your new units, your 8-bound. These guys are very interesting. They are killy as all hell. Amazing profile. They're very tough, very strong, loads of attacks. All of their weapons are really, really nasty. They have a very interesting ability, Blood Scent. If this unit is in strategic reserves, it can be set up as if the battle round was 1 higher than it currently is, regardless of any mission rules. Note that this means this unit can be set up on the battlefield during the first battle round. That's actually really good. It means they're going to be getting very, 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 very close to the enemy very early on. And one thing you don't want is these guys being close to you. They are nasty. The Exalted 8-bound are kind of like the 8-bound, but with slightly different weapons. They hit harder. They hit way harder. These guys are going to be taking down tanks and things. They're very tough. And they also have, instead of having the Blood Scent, they have Blood Fury, which effectively prevents enemy units from falling back and also prevents them from completing actions. So that's also very good. It disrupts your enemy's battle plan. The Exalted 8-bound are effectively killers. You just want them to be attacking the biggest, nastiest thing in the enemy army. They are repulsively good in close combat. You've got your Hellbrute, it's your Hellbrute, but it benefits from the World Eater's Warlord trait and the Blood Tithe, so that's very nice. Chaos Spawn, they're as good as they ever were. Everyone loves Chaos Spawn. Chaos Land Raiders in World Eater's armies are way better than they are in most other Chaos Space Marine armies. They're way better because A, they've got the glowed up profile from Codex Chaos Space Marines, and they also have better utility for World Eater's armies. They do more in World Eater's armies, which is really, really cool. You've got your suite of Demon Engines, your Defiler, your Forge Fiend, your Mauler Fiend, Chaos Predator Annihilator, Chaos Predator Destructor. Rhinos are very good in World Eater's armies. They're very good because they're cheap. They don't take up force organization slots. They're good transports, and when they get blown up, they give you Blood Tithe points. So they have a slightly different value in a World Eater's army than they do in, say, a Thousand Suns army or a Death Guard army. They're very good. Helldrake, it's the Helldrake. It does what it does. It's a flyer. And you also have the Khorne Lord of Skulls, so they have a Titanic unit. It's very expensive for what it does, but it is very tough. It's very bloody tough. It's like a Titan, this thing, and it will kill things. I'd save that for bigger battles, you know. So that's the World Eaters. They are a very, very interesting army. They play unlike anything in 40k. For one thing, they're not very good at taking objectives, and Ninth Ed is all about taking objectives. These guys, what they're about is eliminating the enemy from the objectives and tabling the enemy. That's kind of what they're for. They are very bad at holding objectives in general. They are an assault-based army, which is unusual basically it's been unusual in 40k for a very long time, but they work very, very well. They require a sort of psychological rejigging of how you play 40k and how you perceive 40k to work. But when you've got them down, when you understand how they work, they're going to do the business again and again and again and again. Of course, their stay in 9th Ed is going to be quite short-lived because 10th Ed, as we now know, is just around the corner. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they fare when they turn up in 10th edition, and how that alters the way they play, because that is, I mean, it's going to be a significant change. But for now, in 9th Ed, I imagine these guys are going to be turning up competitively quite a lot. They are unusual. They're like all of the Chaos Space Marine cult armies. They represent a particular extreme, and as a result, they are difficult to play, but once you've got them down, they're very, very rewarding indeed. And I mean, just in terms of background and fluff and ethos, there's so much going on in this codex. It's a joy to read, and it's great to see them there. It's great to see them alongside the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons. Can't wait to see the Emperor's Children. I have an inkling they'll be coming in 10th Ed, not until probably late on in 10th, but they will be here. Cannot wait to see it. Until next time, my loves, bye-bye.
Could